Star Wars 1977 made a strong mark in cinematic history with its spectacular scenes and iconic characters. But behind the screen's glamour, the actors endured silent tragedies, depression, addiction, personal losses, and media pressure. Exploring their real-life stories honors the legacy they left behind. Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia. Organa glamour, hiding the pain. Carrie Fisher, born on October 21, 1956, in Beverly Hills, USA, stepped into the world of cinema at just 19 with the role of Princess Leia Organa. On screen, Leia was an icon of wisdom, courage, and leadership, always shining with witty dialogue and a radiant smile. Yet in real life, Carrie had to confront pains that few could see. Fame came too soon, placing her in a continuous spiral of stress, while loneliness and the pressure of public attention caused her to struggle with depression. Furthermore, Carrie also battled substance addiction for many years, which was both a way to forget broken relationships and an expression of secret desperation. Although she was a sharp writer and author of several memoirs revealing her inner life, Carrie still had to conceal much suffering behind her cheerful screen image. The stressful days with the media, personal failures, and professional pressure kept her in a state of being both resilient and quietly weary. Carrie Fisher passed away on December 27, 2016, at the age of 60. Her ashes were kept by her family, but the image she left behind lives on in the hearts of fans. The brilliance on screen still contrasts with the silent tragedies in her life, turning Carrie into an icon not only of cinema, but also of the profound inner struggles that few ever saw. Peter Cushing, as Grand Moff Tarkin. Coldness behind the spotlight. Peter Cushing was born on May 26, 1913 in London, England, and played the role of Grand Moff Tarkin when he was 64. On screen, Tarkin emerged as the archetype of power, decisiveness, and coldness, a character who commanded both respect and fear from the audience. But in everyday life, Cushing went through years full of loneliness and loss, completely opposite to the cold image he portrayed on screen. His life was dominated by poor health and little-known personal tragedies. Cushing lived in persistent loneliness, having to confront the deaths of loved ones and his own limitations in his acting career. Although hailed as a talented actor, he often felt professional pressure and was sometimes underestimated in comparison to major roles, meaning his brilliant achievements on screen could not dispel his hidden pain. In his final years, Cushing's health increasingly declined, but he still maintained his passion for cinema, participating in many projects and writing memoirs as a way to hold on to his light before loneliness and illness. He passed away on August 11, 1994, at the age of 81. Grand Moff Tarkin remains an icon of power in cinematic history. But Peter Cushing, the real man, is proof of the silent tragedies hidden behind the screen characters that the audience rarely sees. Alec Guinness as Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi. Silent emotions behind the light. Alec Guinness, born on April 2, 1914 in London, England, took on the role of Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi when he turned 63. On screen, Obi-Wan Kenobi is the archetype of wisdom, composure, and unwavering morality, the guide and protector of generations of Jedi. To the audience, he emerged as a stable anchor amidst the chaos of the galaxy. However, in real life, Alec Guinness lived in a quiet world full of pressures and personal tragedies, completely contrary to the character's majestic image. Guinness had to deal with psychological and health difficulties throughout his career. Beneath the glamour of fame, he felt lonely and sometimes lost within the very achievements that the whole world admired. Professional pressures, expectations from the audience and media, plus his self-imposed strictness in every role, forced Guinness to constantly struggle to maintain his external image. This level of seriousness bordering on harshness also diminished personal joy and closeness in his private life. Alec Guinness passed away on August 5, 2000, at the age of 86. Although the character Obi-Wan Kenobi lives on in the hearts of fans, the real man Guinness is proof of the silent sorrows that few ever saw, where the dazzling lights and inspirational dialogue on screen concealed the deep emotions and inner struggles throughout his life. Peter Mayhew as Chewbacca. Brilliant height. Deep loneliness. Born on May 19, 1944 in London, England, Peter Mayhew is synonymous with the image of the gigantic Chewbacca on screen, a symbol of strength and loyalty. When he participated in Star Wars at the age of 33, Mayhew not only stepped into an iconic role, but also brought the character a vibrant presence that global audiences will forever remember. However, beyond the brown fur and legendary roar, Mayhew's life was full of private challenges that few ever saw. His height of 2.18 meters, 7 feet 2 inches, which was an advantage in embodying Chewbacca, also placed him under many difficulties in everyday life, movement, health, and daily activities all became arduous. Peter had to undergo many severe joint and bone problems and experienced physical limitations which caused him constant pain and difficulty in daily life. Furthermore, professional pressure and living under the spotlight of an overly famous character sometimes made him feel isolated, even though on screen Chewbacca was always a loyal and strong companion. Peter Mayhew passed away on April 30, 2019 at the age of 74. Although Chewbacca lives on in the hearts of fans, his image, the real man, is proof of the silent pains, the years of struggling with his body and loneliness that the screen's glamour never fully revealed. David Prowse as Darth Vader. External power. Internal loneliness. David Prowse was born on July 1, 1935 in Bristol, England. At the age of 40, he donned the legendary armor of Darth Vader in Star Wars, becoming an icon of power and authority that astonished audiences worldwide. On screen, Vader is the image of majesty, coldness, and absolute power. But David, the real man, lived in a completely different world, lonely, struggling, and little understood. Outside the screen's glamour, Prowse encountered many difficulties in his personal and professional life. Although he was the physical body of Vader, his voice was not used for the character in the film, which caused much emotional hurt and a feeling of being overlooked. Furthermore, David had to face health issues due to his tall physique and the physical strain of wearing the heavy costume in many scenes. Added to this, his relationship with colleagues and managing fame made him feel isolated many times, even though on screen, Vader always exuded authority and prestige. David Prowse passed away on November 28, 2020, at the age of 85. The image of Darth Vader lives on in the memory of fans, but the real man, who battled feelings of being undervalued, silent pains, and declining health, reminds us that behind the great armor and the screen's light are deep struggles that few know about. Phil Brown as Uncle Owen. Quiet life, deep loneliness. Born on April 30, 1916 in Chicago, USA. Phil Brown appeared on screen as Uncle Owen when he was 61, bringing the image of a loving and calm family protector. On screen, he emerged as a safe anchor for Luke and Leia, someone who was always composed and cared for those around him. Yet in real life, Phil Brown went through years of loneliness and challenges that few viewers could imagine. Despite a rich acting career, he faced many personal difficulties, including professional pressure, the limitations of age, and declining health. Phil Brown had to struggle to maintain joy in his work while still confronting the feeling of being overshadowed by the fame of other roles. His daily life was not as brilliant as the screen's glamour, but quiet, sometimes filled with moments of self-doubt about his self-worth and contributions. Phil Brown passed away on February 9, 2006 at the age of 89. The role of Uncle Owen is still remembered by audiences as a symbol of peace and family affection. But the real man Brown, full of loneliness and silent struggles, reminds us that behind every smile, every warm gaze on screen is a complex life which sometimes only he fully understood. Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker. Screen hero. Real-life struggle. Mark Hamill was born on September 25, 1951 in California, USA. When he first entered Star Wars, Hamill was very young, about 25 years old, and quickly became the icon of Luke Skywalker, the courageous, steadfast, and hopeful hero. On screen, Luke shone with daring action sequences and inspiring dialogue, becoming a role model for generations of young viewers. But outside the dazzling lights, Hamill's life went through challenges that few saw. Right from the start of his fame, he had to confront media pressure and the enormous expectations from fans. A serious car accident in the early years of his career also left long-lasting health consequences, causing Hamill to struggle physically and mentally. Furthermore, he also had to balance his career and private life, sometimes feeling locked into the Luke Skywalker image created by the public. The screen's glamour always seemed to contrast with the silent struggles he went through, from health worries and professional pressure to moments of self-doubt about his self-worth. Currently, at the age of 74, Hamill still participates in many projects and shares his life and professional experience with the audience. Luke Skywalker lives on in the hearts of fans, but Mark Hamill is proof of the profound difference between the brilliant image on screen and the silent struggles in real life, where every smile and courageous action sequence conceals a much more complex story. Harrison Ford as Han Solo. The brilliant pilot, the quiet loneliness. Harrison Ford was born on July 13, 1942 in Chicago, USA. When he stepped into Star Wars, Ford was in his early 30s and quickly became Han Solo, the cunning, audacious pilot who was both humorous and charismatic. On screen, Han Solo was the character who made audiences both laugh and gasp at his reckless action sequences, becoming an icon of freedom and the adventurous spirit. But Ford's real life was not just glamour and applause. He also went through many silent struggles that few noticed. Beyond fame, Ford had to face professional pressure, stress in his personal life, and a complex relationship with the media. The prolonged fame associated with Han Solo sometimes made him feel locked in the shadow of the character, despite being a talented actor with many other excellent roles. The accidents and health challenges over time were also a part of the darkness that paralleled the screen's glamour, reminding us that success does not erase hidden struggles. Currently, at the age of 83, Ford still participates in many film projects, while also sharing his life experience and stories with the audience. Han Solo lives on in the memory of fans, but Harrison Ford is clear proof of the difference between the brilliant image on screen and the silent struggles in real life, where the real man has to battle health pressure and secret worries that the stage light cannot reach. Anthony Daniels as C-3PO. The resounding screen voice. The silent loneliness. Anthony Daniels, born on February 21, 1946 in Salisbury, England, entered the world of Star Wars at the age of 31 to become C-3PO, the awkward but loyal golden robot. On screen, C-3PO brought laughter, charm, and support to the other characters, making audiences love his every gesture and distinctive voice. Yet inside the shiny armor was an Anthony Daniels who confronted years of loneliness and professional pressure, something few realized. The role of a lifetime brought prolonged fame, but also locked him into the image of C-3PO. Although beloved, Daniels once had to struggle with professional pressure, fan expectations, and the demanding requirements on set. The long hours wearing the heavy, movement-restricting costume also put a strain on his body, reminding us that the glamour on screen sometimes comes with silent pains. At the age of 79, Daniels continues to participate in Star Wars projects and share his professional experience with the audience while maintaining his passion for the role of C-3PO. The golden robot lives on in the memory of fans as a symbol of humor and loyalty, but the real man, Anthony Daniels, is proof of the profound difference between the screen's light and the silent, persistent struggles in the real life of a lifelong dedicated artist. Sheila Fraser as Queen Breha, Organa Regal. Light, silent sorrow. Sheila Fraser was born on November 25, 1920 in Purley, England. When she joined Star Wars, she was in her late 50s, taking on the role of Queen Breha Organa, the calm, regal, and responsible mother. On screen, Breha was an icon of leadership and steady maternal love, but Fraser's real life went through years full of challenges and silent loneliness little known to the public. Although Fraser's acting career was rich and respectable, her personal life was not without pressures and tragedies. She once had to balance her career, family responsibilities, and professional expectations, which meant many triumphant moments on screen concealed the anxieties and silent struggles of her everyday life. Furthermore, health and age also became unavoidable limitations, forcing her many times to face her own boundaries when embodying important roles. Sheila Fraser passed away on August 29, 2000 at the age of 79. The role of Queen Breha Organa lives on in the audience's memory as the image of a kind mother and a calm leader, but the real person Fraser is proof of the profound difference between the screen's glamour and the silent sorrows of real life, where the brilliant moments on film could not erase the silent struggles and loneliness of a dedicated, lifelong artist. Alec McCrindle as General Dodonna, screen strategist. Off-screen, loneliness. Alec McCrindle was born on August 3, 1911 in England, and when he joined Star Wars, he was in his late 60s embodying General Dodonna, the calm, sharp military strategist who led the Rebel Alliance during the most intense moments. On screen, Dodonna was an icon of wisdom, composure, and strategic vision, earning the audience's trust and admiration. But McCrindle's real life went through many challenges, professional pressure, and silent loneliness, which few realized. Although his acting career was long and respectable, McCrindle had to face the limitations of age-declining health and the pressure to maintain his performance on set. The role of General Dodonna, while bringing glamour and respect, could not mask the internal stress and loneliness he had to endure off-screen. The years of struggling with family responsibilities, his career, and public pressure proved that the stage light did not fully reflect his true life. Alec McCrindle passed away on April 20, 1990, at the age of 78. General Dodonna lives on in the audience's memory as an icon of wisdom and strategy. But the real man, McCrindle, is proof of the silent struggles, loneliness, and secret worries that the screen's glamour could not fully show, reminding us that behind every famous character is always a rich and complex inner life. Eddie Byrne as General Willard's steadfast leader. Silent loneliness. Eddie Byrne was born on January 31, 1911 in Dublin, Ireland. When he joined Star Wars, he was about 66 years old, embodying General Willard, the calm, resolute leader who helped direct the operations of the Rebel Alliance. On screen, Willard emerged with prestige and decisiveness, an archetype of composure and responsibility. But Byrne's real life went through many silent tragedies and challenges known to few. Although his acting career was rich, Byrne once had to face professional pressures, health stress, and moments of loneliness in his personal life. The fame and glamour that the role of General Willard brought could not conceal the silent struggles, the limitations of age, family worries, and professional pressure often followed him throughout the rest of his life. The strong presence on screen was only the tip of the iceberg, while Byrne's inner life was full of worries and challenges that few knew about. Eddie Byrne passed away on August 21, 1981, at the age of 70. General Willard lives on in the audience's memory as an icon of calm and steadfast leadership, but the real man, Eddie Byrne, is proof of the silent struggles, loneliness, and everyday challenges that the screen's glamour does not reflect, reminding us that behind every famous character is always a rich and complex life. Although Star Wars 1977 was a cinematic phenomenon, brilliant with iconic characters and spectacular action sequences, the screen's light is only a small part of the story. Behind every role, every beloved character are real lives full of tragedy, loneliness, and silent struggles. This contrast not only deepens the experience of the film, but also opens up another perspective. Cinema is not just entertainment, but also a place that reflects the struggles, failures, and secret pains of the real person. And as the story of Star Wars concludes, we see that the rhythm of Hollywood continued over decades with other films, also fraught with tragedies behind the glamour. One of the important precursors to the science fiction genre before Star Wars was Lost in Space, 1965. Like Star Wars, Lost in Space also had actors living in the artificial glamour on screen, but having to struggle with professional pressure, personal challenges, and private tragedies. Jonathan Harris as Dr. Zachary Smith, the acerbic laughter in cold space. Born in the Bronx in the winter of 1914 to a Russian Jewish immigrant family, Jonathan Harris learned early on how to make others laugh, a skill not just for affection, but for survival. When he took on the role of Dr. Zachary Smith in Lost in Space, he was over 50, and Jonathan understood that this was his last chance to establish his name. Initially, his character was just a minor villain, but Harris himself transformed Smith into the soul of the series, an arrogant, cowardly, yet endearingly witty individual. Every exclamation, every raised eyebrow, every sigh of "oh, the pain" became an irreplaceable trademark. Audiences loved Smith for his pathetic absurdity, but few knew that behind that mask of humor was a tormented soul. Harris once confessed that he feared being forgotten. After the series ended, the shadow of the role was so vast that all subsequent offers revolved around the same type of character, sarcastic, theatrical, and exaggerated. He, the perfectionist artist, longed to be recognized for more serious roles. "Hollywood loves to cage people in a stereotype," he once said, "and I was its happiest victim." After Lost in Space concluded, Harris spent the rest of his life doing voiceover work, teaching, and appearing on small television programs. He maintained his refined demeanor, impeccably tailored suit, and always flat tie, as if preparing to step onto the stage at any moment. But a close friend once revealed he was very lonely. After every recording session, Jonathan often sat alone talking to no one. Perhaps that's why he loved the role of Smith so much, because only in that fictional world was he able to live truthfully with his own weakness. On November 3, 2002, just 3 days before his 88th birthday, Jonathan Harris passed away in his sleep in Encino, California. His death was as gentle as his departure from the screen. No fanfare, no tears. Just a moment of silence in the hearts of his fans. He left behind his wife and only son, along with a legacy of hundreds of television roles and one immortal character, Dr. Smith, the villain we both hated and loved. Jonathan Harris's net worth upon his death was estimated at around $5 million US, modest compared to the spiritual value he left behind. But perhaps the most precious thing is the laughter of millions of viewers every time they hear the line, "Oh, the pain." An acerbic yet deeply human lament, both Smith's dialogue and the self-reflection of Jonathan Harris himself, the man who spent his life turning pain into laughter. Guy Williams as Professor John Robinson, the lonely hero in a foreign land. On January 14, 1924, in New York, a boy of Italian descent was born named Armando Joseph Catalano, later known to the world as Guy Williams. Fate seemed to have chosen the mantle of a hero for him, an uncommon height, a cinematic face, and a composed presence. Years later, when he entered the set of Lost in Space, he was past 41, bringing the maturity of an experienced man to create Professor John Robinson, the steady father, a calm commander amidst the turbulent cosmos. John Robinson's authority came from his restraint. Minimal commands, a resolute gaze, a hand placed on his child's shoulder just as panic flared. Audiences loved him for the sense of being protected the character provided. But this very perfection became an invisible cage in real life. After the lights dimmed, Guy Williams was typecast into the image of the invulnerable hero. Most scripts that came his way wanted him to repeat the same stance, the same standard smile. He wanted to be weak, wanted a role where he could sigh, even collapse. But Hollywood did not want their hero to cry. In the mid-1980s, he left the U.S. as a way to reduce the noise of the past. Buenos Aires welcomed him with unusual affection. Children called Zorro in the streets. Adults invited him for coffee, asking about his health as if he were family. There, Guy lived simply in a sunny apartment, reading in the morning, playing the guitar in the afternoon, listening to the city breathe at night. For the first time, he was loved not for the television legend, but for the man smiling in front of them. And there, too, he learned to accept if he couldn't change his role on screen, he would change the rhythm of his life off-screen. Despite this, loneliness persisted like a shadow behind him. Friends recounted that he often stood by the window for a long time watching the sun move off the red-tiled roofs, as if waiting for a scene that never came. He did not complain, only remained silent. The silence of someone who understood the price of glamour and the different price of staying after the applause has faded. In the memory of those who met him, Guy was elegant to the last, his shirt neatly ironed, his gestures restrained, his words measured. As if at any moment the director might shout, "Action!" On April 30th, 1989, in Buenos Aires, the quiet story concluded. Guy Williams passed away aged 65. His passing was discovered late, a detail that saddened fans. Their hero was, after all, a human being who could be lonely even in a city that loved him. No one remembers exactly how much wealth he left behind. What people remember is the composed stance of Professor John Robinson beneath the starlit sky. In the old film reels, he still looks straight ahead. And in a very private corner of the universe, Guy Williams perhaps found where he belonged. Dick Tufeld, the voice of the robot and narrator, an unfading echo in the void. There are voices that, when uttered immediately, bring back our entire childhood memory. For millions of viewers, that sound is the warning, "Danger, Will Robinson," echoing through cold space. That voice belonged to Dick Tufeld, a man who never appeared in the frame but gave Lost in Space its soul. He was the voice of the robot, the narrator who opened every episode, the steady heartbeat that kept that entire fictional universe alive. Born in Los Angeles on December 11, 1926, Dick Tufeld quickly found his passion for sound. While his friends dreamed of becoming actors, he chose to sit behind the microphone where only his voice and imagination were his companions. With a deep, resonant voice and dramatic inflections, Tufeld quickly became a familiar announcer for ABC radio. He was the kind of artist who did not need a face to be remembered. One phrase was enough for people to know instantly who it was. Behind that professionalism was a meticulous person, sometimes overly critical of himself. He would often record the same line dozens of times just to adjust his breath. "I wasn't just reading lines," he once said, "I was narrating the heartbeat of the universe." It was that spirit that made the robot in Lost in Space a character with genuine emotion despite being inanimate metal. People loved the robot for its wit and loyalty, and they loved the voice that breathed soul into it. After Lost in Space ended, Tufeld continued his voiceover work, lending his voice to countless films and programs, but gradually withdrew from the crowds. He rarely gave interviews, living a simple life with his family in California. Friends described him as warm yet reserved, the kind of person who would silence a room when he spoke, then quietly retreat when the party ended. It seems he understood well his job was to make others hear, not to be seen. On January 22, 2012, Dick Tufeld passed away in Studio City, California, aged 85. His ashes were interred near Los Angeles, where he once began his journey with sound waves. His net worth was estimated at around $4 million, a modest figure, but the auditory legacy he left behind is immeasurable. In the final moments of many Lost in Space episodes, his voice still resonated in the dark void, both distant and familiar. Now, when we hear the robot say, "Danger, Will Robinson," it is not just a line. It is the echo of an artist who spent his life telling stories to the world with his very own breath. Sheila Allen, guest star as Aunt Gamma, the gentle presence behind the scenes. Sheila Allen was not a leading star, had no golden statues or dozens of headlines, but every time she appeared, people remembered her. In Lost in Space, she was only a guest, the fleeting role of Aunt Gamma, yet her intelligent gaze and composed demeanor were enough for the audience to recognize there was a layer of subtle artistry hidden within that simplicity. Born on February 2, 1929 in New York, Sheila grew up in a period when women had to fight twice as hard to be recognized in the film industry. She did not follow the visible path of fame, but chose to stand behind the spotlight, working with directors, assisting with production, sometimes merely serving as a consultant backstage. The name Sheila Allen is associated with a style of filmmaking that was meticulous, compassionate, and full of dedication. Therefore, when director Irwin Allen, who later became her husband, invited Sheila to appear in Lost in Space, the audience sensed the quiet respect the entire crew held for her. Sheila's life was not a violent tragedy. but a series of long, low notes. After Irwin Allen's death, she lived quietly, refusing most interview requests. Friends recounted that she often said, "I had a life behind the camera, and there I was happy." Hidden behind her composure was the loneliness of someone who witnessed the entire world of cinema change when films shot on celluloid were gradually forgotten and the people who made them also vanished from public memory. Sheila Allen passed away on November 15, 2013 in California, aged 84. Her ashes were interred next to Irwin Allen, her husband, colleague, and creative soulmate. Her net worth was estimated at around $3 million, largely from royalties for television productions she co-produced in the 1970s-1980s. But the true value Sheila left behind does not lie in that figure, but in the spirit of complete quiet and unpretentious dedication to her craft. Today, few still remember Aunt Gamma, but whenever the old film is replayed, some viewers still pause for a few seconds before that face, the face of a woman who exuded warmth without needing to stand out. Sheila Allen, in her own unique way, is proof that sometimes not everyone needs to be in the spotlight. Some people are born to make that light gentler. It's been nearly 6 decades since Lost in Space first took off on the small screen in 1965, yet the image of the Robinson family lives on in the memories of millions of viewers. That generation of actors brought joy, laughter, and dreams of a brilliant future beyond space. However, behind that seemingly immortal glamour are silent tragedies, personal struggles that few have ever seen. Lost in Space is not just a science fiction series, but a mirror reflecting the fate of artists who committed their entire hearts to the audience's cosmos. These real-life stories, whether tragic or quiet, remind us that behind every smile on screen are real people with fears, losses, and abandoned dreams. They smiled for us to smile, they cried in silence for us to see a more beautiful universe. And perhaps that is the noblest tragedy, when the artist must sacrifice a part of their life to create an immortal moment for others. Now, when you mention Lost in Space, remember not just the glittering images on the screen, but also the hearts behind the camera, the people who quietly endured, loved, and lived fully for their art. And what about you? Which character in Lost in Space left the deepest impression on you? Share your feelings in the comments section, and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue exploring the emotional behind-the-scenes stories where light and shadow coexist, just like the very nature of humanity.